All right, welcome in. Welcome back to KLIM.news. I've neglected my own personal platforms for a while, pursuing other endeavors, but I want to get back to it. Want to just be in control of all of the content, who I speak with. And so, yeah, I'm going to get back into it, but I got to work out a few kinks as far as it's very difficult to do it all, to produce and to switch and all of the things. But I think it's important and going to take a crack at it again. I've also neglected a lot of some of these platforms because where this is going live to, I've experienced, we'll say, hiding. I don't know even who can see the content. So that was discouraging. And I kind of took a break from it for a while, but I'm going to give it another go and see how it goes. So thanks for joining me. If you're joining me today, wanted to have the conversation about election 2024. And apparently, and again, some of these platforms were not really supposed to talk about that. But I have not made a decision. I'm undecided when it comes to that. And, we have our Republican candidate, of course, Donald Trump. We have our Democrat candidate. Perhaps there's some that wonder if it will be Biden or not. Maybe talk about that. And also, let's not forget the now independent candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I'm going to be talking about that with Jeff Dornik. He's the CEO and co-founder of Freedom First Network. It airs on Rumble and Apple Podcast. He also hosts a podcast, Jeff Dornik Show, co-authored 2 books, Church and State, How the Left Used the Church to Conquer America, and a social justice book, Social Justice, Exposing the False Gospel of the Social Justice Movement. So he's been busy too, but there was a particular tweet that caught my attention, and I'm going to attempt to show it to you. So here it is. Let's see. All right, so here it is. He says, another reason seriously open to the idea of voting for Robert Kennedy Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He has also not made his decision. And it was a post by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking about the importance of freeing Julian Assange, which is near and dear to my heart too, because I believe in freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And I think it's just awful what's been done to him. And to be honest, I'm not sure if Donald Trump has taken a stance on that. I do know that he didn't pardon him when he had the chance. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Jeff in. Here we go. Hey, Jeff. So this is going to be an interesting conversation because everyone has their opinions. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you that it's encouraging to see Robert F. Kennedy Jr. stand up and be in support of Julian Assange. And, I can't honestly say why we haven't seen more of that from Trump. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's been one major disappointment that I've had with President Trump is that the whole MAGA movement and America First movement that I fell in love with and I backed literally the second Trump came down the escalator back in 2015 was okay. We're taking on the establishment. We're taking on the bad guys. We're taking on the powers that be, and we are going to expose them and declare the truth and all that. And then you've got somebody like Julian Assange that did that very thing, literally bypassed all the systems, went straight to the people, just like Trump, when you think about it, went straight to the people with the truth, exposed the corruption. And Trump didn't pardon the one guy that actually was doing exactly what we expected Donald Trump to do. That to me is one of the big things that I feel like almost nobody's really talking about all that much. And I'm glad that somebody like an RFK is now beginning to talk with it. And, there can be a debate and we can have that conversation about does RFK have a legitimate chance to win? I think that he does have some pathways to the presidency that I think are pretty legitimate. But I think whether or not you think that he has a chance to win, one of the beauties about an RFK candidacy is that if they have debates, which I still don't know if they're going to have debates because of the alleged President Joe Biden and the whole deal. But I will say this. The beauty of an RFK is that he could do what Ron Paul did in the previous GOP primaries, is force these guys to have conversations that they don't want to have. And this is one of those issues that I think he could force both Joe Biden and Donald Trump to actually have to engage with this issue in a way that I don't think that either one of them actually want to.
Absolutely. Are you aware of how Robert F. Kennedy Jr., where he stands on the persecution of January Sixers, particularly those that just were walking around? I don't see how anyone can't look at this objectively and say, okay, there was things that were shady that went down that day for sure. But we have very recently seen the same kind of uh, riots, if you will, at the Capitol, and no one's been treated this way. It's very, very obvious it's an inequitable justice, that there's a lot of questions that still need answered. I mean, 3 years later, we're just finding out more about this pipe bomb, and why was that not talked about more? It wasn't where the FBI said it was. There's just so many questions. I mean, according to the mainstream narrative that first came out, basically there was an attempted assassination of a vice president with a pipe bomb outside of the DNC headquarters. And why didn't they talk about that more if that was such a big deal? Well, it turns out from video evidence that we now see that there was a sweep when she was there, and the dog didn't smell it, like the camera was turned away. So many weird things surrounding this. So it's important to me, since I've talked to a lot of these people who've had their lives completely destroyed for what I believe is political purposes, that any candidate speaks to that. Obviously, we know that Biden's using that day to campaign on, we must avoid domestic extremism. We must avoid, another insurrection, even though not anyone was charged with insurrection. So it's a ridiculous narrative that they put out there. So do you happen to know where he stands on that, or how important to you is that?
Yeah, I have not heard like an official statement from RFK. I know in passing there's been a handful, I believe, of like interviews and things like that where he's been asked somewhat about it. I think he's kind of couched his answers to a certain degree, to a certain degree, even the same as Trump a lot of times, where I don't know how much he's actually researched it. I don't know how much he's actually looked at it. So that, to me, that's not making an excuse. It's just my assessment of an RFK when it comes to his views on J6. The one thing that I will say is that if I ever do get the chance, and I'm trying to work with RFK's team to get him on my show, that will be one of the questions that I do talk to him about and ask him about, because I think it is so important, especially when you look at RFK's history of really exposing a lot of the corruption in the intelligence agencies and the CIA and the FBI, and especially with the assassination of his father, the assassination of his uncle. He understands that they actually work against the United States of America. They actually work against the American people, and they'll do these kinds of things. I know he has a very good plan, in my opinion, on handling the CIA, which is separating the clandestine side of things and the investigative side of things, into where he wants to actually have accountability, because he's like, right now they're basically working together where one side is covering for the other and vice versa. And I know he said that he wants to kind of separate those out within the intelligence agencies and actually bring back accountability, which I think is good. And I haven't heard anything of the sort coming from the Trump camp. I hope that Trump will come out with an actual plan to deal with the intelligence agencies, because we do know that they're weaponized against the American people. But I don't know officially where RFK would fall when it comes to the actual J6 prisoners and things like that off the top of my head.
So let's talk about the positives that we know. Like, at least he's speaking up about corruption, because we can see that everywhere. At least he's speaking up about defense of Julian Assange. And to your point, he has a track record of going after corruption. I find it attractive that he doesn't care about the media smears against him. He's handled those interviews very well and redirected it. They always like to give these labels to him, and he just doesn't accept it and brings the evidence. And so that's a positive. And I mean, I think that for everything that we're, again, now learning more about, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. believes that his family members were murdered by the intelligence agency. There's a lot of evidence that speaks to, there's plenty of unanswered questions. I think the majority of American people know that the story they were given about JFK assassination is not the full truth, if any of it is true. And so it would be an incredible redemption story if he were able to get this position, and it would be interesting to see what he does with it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I've heard his explanation of dealing with JFK's assassination and then also his father's assassination. And it's really interesting because he knows this stuff inside and out. He's not just saying, yeah, I think the CIA did it because they hated what you were doing. No, he's like actually looking at the documented evidence of here's where the gunpowder was, here's where the gunshot was fired from, here's how we know what angle the bullet came from, and all of that. So you're like, okay, what he's actually saying, it makes pretty legitimate sense when it comes to that side of things, and the fact that this was actually coming from the CIA and our intelligence agencies and all that. I think specifically when it comes to an RFK presidency, the way that I look at it is that there's five major issues that I think that we here in the United States really, and I'm going to hopefully remember all of these off the top of my head, but there's five specific issues that I think that we're really facing, that if we actually want a country and we want to deal with all these other divisive issues that we got going on, we have to fix these five things. And I would argue that Donald Trump has been spot on when it comes to, I believe, 4 out of the 5. And RFK has been spot on when it comes to 4 out of the 5. And a lot of people don't like me saying that because they're like, well, RFK, he's been a lifelong Democrat. And I always counter with, well, Donald Trump was a lifelong Democrat until a couple of years before he ran for president. So, if you're gonna throw that accusation out there, you've got to embrace that on your own side too. But we have to deal with foreign policy and a good foreign policy. I think both Donald Trump and RFK have a strong foreign policy. I've obviously with Trump being in office, we saw basically world peace for 3.5 years. We didn't get into any new wars. All of that. Trump gets out of office. All of a sudden, now we're on the brink of World War III. RFK's explanation in handling of Ukraine versus Russia and his understanding of the intricacies of those conversations, I find very, very compelling. So I kind of look at them both. They're both in the same playing field on that one. The other thing that I think we really have to deal with are these public-private partnerships that we saw, especially with Big Pharma and the CDC. We also see that with Big Food and the EPA. We also see it with big banks and the regulating industries, all these different agencies, and I would give the edge to RFK on that one over a Trump. I think Trump during COVID, he embraced the public-private partnerships, whereas RFK understands we cannot allow these companies to actually control and basically buy off the regulating industries and our own government. So I give the edge to him there. And then I think one of the things where RFK, in my opinion, fails is on the issue of election fraud. But also at the same time, I feel like Trump has not done a good job of actually articulating how the elections were stolen. I just saw him on with Brett Baer the other night, and he kept saying that the elections were stolen, but he could not articulate how. And so we've got to deal with the election. So there are definitely things where I'm looking at this and I'm like, we have to deal with these big issues. I think the other big issue is the intelligence agencies. I think both Trump and RFK, they want to deal with rooting out the deep state. We've got a show on our network called Two Mics with one of the hosts is Dr. Michael Scheuer, former CIA guy. He's been very critical of the CIA over the years. He said we basically have to tear it down and rebuild it from scratch, kind of a thing. He made this point. He's like, the deep state is terrified of Donald Trump because he's a bull in a china shop. They're more terrified of a Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because he knows where the bodies are buried. And I think that that's an interesting way of looking at things when it comes to it. They're both right in having to root out the deep state, but the question is, do we need a bull or do we need a surgeon? And I think that that's kind of where where everybody kind of has to make that decision heading into 2024.
Well, speaking of your description of a bull, which I'm assuming you mean Trump, it is interesting that in an interview, Putin said he actually would prefer Biden as president because Biden is, he said, quote, predictable, and I that was the compliment that Trump received from others about why he was so good at foreign relations and why we avoided wars for so long or getting into wars was because he was unpredictable. The other leaders didn't really know what to do with him. And so as much as they try and tie Trump to Putin, it's funny that Putin is like, oh, I'd prefer Biden. What did you make of that? Did you see that clip?
Yeah, I saw that clip. And here's the thing is that he's not wrong, because if he's looking out for the best interests of Russia, he would want Joe Biden in office. Because I mean, when you think about it, look what's actually happened. Biden talks a big game, but doesn't really follow up. When you actually think about it, the beauty about Trump when he was president of the United States everybody thought that he was just crazy enough that if they did cross him, he just might push that red button. Like Joe Biden, he comes in office, I will never push the red button ever. I will never do this. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, okay, cool. He's not going to do it. We can go about free reign. They're going to maybe do a few drone strikes here and there. We can live with that thing. But Donald Trump, they're like, oh, if I cross him, he may actually wipe us off the face of the earth because they believe the narrative. Okay, he's crazy, right? So to a certain degree, that's this whole idea of having this kind of defending yourself with a position of strength. That doesn't mean going in and starting wars like Nikki Haley wants to do and all the establishment rhinos do. It means you have to portray yourself as, look, if you cross me, I will wipe you off the face of the earth. And look what Donald Trump did with ISIS in the first 6 months of his presidency. Donald Trump sat down with his generals and said, look, Obama and Bush have been carrying this on for way too long. Yeah. You no longer have to come to me for permission to deal with it. Just do your job and get rid of them. Within 6 months, ISIS, who had conquered basically the entire Middle East, was rooted out, wiped out. The power was given back to those individual countries. It was no longer basically one country ruled by ISIS over there. That was a very strong move that Donald Trump did, and it set an example to North Korea and China and Russia, is that, look, if you cross me and you do this and you cross the United States of America, like, I am not afraid to go nuclear on you guys, both figuratively and potentially in reality. And I think that put the fear of, okay, I can't cross that line. We'll go up, we'll toe the line, but I can't cross it. And that's the difference between a Joe Biden and a Donald Trump.
Well, you did mention establishment Republicans, so it would probably be a good time to bring this up, although I have to fix right now where you're seeing, because you're not even seeing what I'm talking about. Like I said, I'm going to be a little rusty at first. So Ronna McDaniel announcing she's resigning as RNC chair. Did you see this coming?
It was only a matter of time. In all reality, nobody likes her. I don't even know how she lasted this long, except for the fact that we also have to understand that they stack the deck within the Republican Party. So it's not up to the individual Republicans to actually vote in for the GOP chair. It's actually basically a bunch of uniparty rhinos that make the decision. So of course she got reelected. But you know, she is the exemplification of what's wrong with the Republican Party. I went to a local GOP event out here in Orange County where they portrayed, they brought out all the candidates that were running for office. And oh, surprise guest, Ronna McDaniel's here. So I actually got to hear her speak. One of the most boring, uncompelling people I've ever actually heard. And it's almost like both her and the entire Orange County GOP out here in communist California, it's like they were talking as if the last 4 or 6 years had never even happened. It was like they're trying to go back to 2014 Republican Party. And I'm like, I don't want to hear that you're reaching across the aisle with Gavin Newsom to try to get bills passed out here in California. I want to hear that you're actually taking them on and actually doing something and succeeding and things like that. So it was only a matter of time. My concern is who's going to replace her, because the same people that reelected her are the same people that are going to select the new GOP chair. It's not going to be an America First person, in my opinion. It's not going to be somebody that we like. It's going to be another uniparty Republican.
And this speaks overall to why people like you and I are torn and undecided, because the RNC has been such a complete disappointment. There is a uniparty. The Republicans have, when they have control of the House, nothing gets done. It's all press conferences and no action and threats. I mean, look at what they did with Hunter Biden. He basically spit in their face, had a press conference outside saying he, shouldn't have to respond to the subpoena, and they said that they were going to do something about it, and then they dragged it out. I mean, to my knowledge, still nothing's really been done about that. They respond with angry words and they don't do any action. Now, how much of that is because they think that they can? I don't know. But it's just time and time again, it's so disappointing. I mean, look how hard it was to get Mayorkas impeached. Donald Trump had 2 impeachments, both based on false accusations with little to no evidence to support their claim. And you have evidence. Just all you have to do is look at what's happening at the border, a total invasion, and they can't get this guy out. I mean, it's just disappointment after disappointment, which leaves you disenchanted. and wondering like, well, I don't even know what I want to do at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so the dirty little secret about the Republican Party, and I've been told this for years. I actually, met with a friend of mine who's a lobbyist out in DC. We had lunch out there last time I visited Washington DC, and we had a conversation. And he's like, the dirty secret is that Republicans, they don't actually want to lead. They don't want to win. They make more money as the opposition. And so, and I learned that firsthand when out here in California when the recall election for Gavin Newsom was going on. I was organizing a bunch of rallies around the state. I had a great lineup of people, all local candidates, local people, get out the vote. I was going to have mini AOC come out and perform, like the whole deal. It was going to be epic. And so I literally went down the list. I talked to all the county GOP heads. I talked to anybody who would take my call, state, whatever it is. And everybody was like, "That sounds awesome." But we don't have the budget for it. We're not gonna spend any money sponsoring it. I'm like, okay, cool. Going on the next one. Finally, somebody told me off the record. They're like, we got a directive from Kevin McCarthy to not spend any money on the recall election. I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, he wants to save all the money for the midterms for sending people to Congress. That way we can try to get, I'm like, okay, strategic. But he's like, the other reason is because he wants a boogeyman to campaign against. They needed Gavin Newsom in office so that way they could campaign against him, raise more money, and get more money in their coffers. And that's the reality of the way that the GOP looks. The GOP thrives when they are not in power, and they can go on, they can post viral videos, they can sit in their congressional hearings and yell at somebody. It's great when they can sit there and yell at Mark Zuckerberg or a Biden official or whatever it is. They go viral. Hey, donate to my campaign. But when we're in leadership, they take a position of weakness. When they can't do anything, that's when they take the position of strength. That's the problem. That's what so many of us are absolutely sick of. Are these guys, they'll talk a big game, but when push comes to shove and they can actually do something, they do jack squat. And this is where I think a lot of people are becoming very disenfranchised with the Republican Party. And it's really interesting. I'm seeing more, I'm talking to more and more conservatives and more Republicans where they'll kind of pull me aside and like, I'm really considering voting for RFK. I'm just sick of voting Republican. I feel like I vote Republican and nothing ever changes. These guys make all these promises. They don't actually do anything. And everybody always tells me on the down low, I really think I'm going to vote RFK just because he, that's where I feel like my vote could actually do something. But it's really interesting. It's very reminiscent of what happened in 2015, 2016, where everybody was saying on the download. They didn't come out publicly and say it, but they're like, I think I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. It's the exact same thing happening with RFK this time around. And a lot of it's within the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement is getting sick and tired of all this kind of stuff too, to where even a lot of them are starting to walk away. So I don't really know what to make of it, but I just think the Republican Party, I just wonder, is it too broken to actually fix?
I agree. And speaking to kind of something that you alluded to, I do feel like that there's sensationalism, division, exhaustion, if you will. I heard from some people that voted for Biden in 2020 say, I just got so sick of all the news being like crazy stuff about Donald Trump and everything's all hysteria and anger. And I just wanted to get back to some feeling of normalcy. And that I can understand. But now those same people are like, wow, that didn't actually do what I wanted it to do. I wanted to see like a stop to that craziness. And actually it's only ramped up. I mean, Donald Trump is usually more in the news than our current president of the United States, even 3 years after being out. So that didn't solve the problem. So I'm wondering with people that have this exhaustion of the pitting of people against each other, that they'll be like, well, maybe if I just go in a completely different direction and cast my vote independently for someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., maybe that will bring about some normalcy again. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, well, I've got kind of two thoughts on that one because I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's really interesting because everybody always posts on Twitter. It's like, bring back the mean tweets. I want cheaper gas, and I'm like, yeah, totally. But here's the difference. When Donald Trump was running in 2015 and 2016. Like, he basically took the Democrat strategy, which is personal attacks, low blows, all that kind of stuff, and he succeeded. He did very good. He wiped out basically the entire Republican Party, all the candidates, what was it, 25, 16 candidates, whatever it was, obliterated them in the primaries and went on to win the election. Here's the difference though. When Donald Trump ran in 2015 and 2016, he was punching up, because he was the underdog. He was the new guy on the field. And so what he was doing is he made all these personal insults, attacks, pitting people against each other, but he was doing it because he was the underdog working his way up. From a strategic standpoint, I'm like, that actually makes legitimate sense. The problem that we have right now is he's the top dog punching down. That is not what we need right now. We don't need Donald Trump punching down to even still today. I've had Jason Miller on my show, who's one of the top advisors for Donald Trump now, all that kind of stuff. They're still going after Ron DeSantis, and Ron DeSantis isn't even in the campaign. They're still punching down. What's happening to all the Ron DeSantis voters? They're all going RFK. Like, that's what's happening right now. The DeSantis voters, there's so many of them, like, I cannot bring myself to vote for Donald Trump. I'm going to vote for RFK because of COVID, and I'm sick and tired of Donald Trump's divisiveness. That's what happens when you're punching down. When you were punching up, it made sense. Donald Trump could then, reunite the Republican Party by picking an establishment candidate like Mike Pence to become his vice president, and they kind of unified back around, brought Ted Cruz back into it, the whole deal. That made sense. It doesn't happen if you're the top dog punching down even after you defeated these candidates. That's the problem that I'm really frustrated with. The other thought is, I live out here in Communist California, surrounded by lefties. Everybody that I know out here voted for Joe Biden. They're triggered by Donald Trump, the whole deal. Like, but here's the interesting thing. They're all sick and tired of Gavin Newsom. They're all sick and tired of Joe Biden. But who are they going to vote for again in the upcoming election? As of right now, they're going to vote for Joe Biden because they don't want to see Donald Trump as president, because they are triggered by him. However, I've been able, I've had conversations with these people for years. Here's why here's the beauty of Trump. Here's his positions. They agree with a lot of his positions, but they cannot bring themselves to pull the trigger and actually vote for Donald Trump because they're just terrified of him. But I can get them to switch over to RFK. I really can. I can get these lefties that are sick and tired of Gavin Newsom and Joe Biden to actually walk away from the Democrat Party, go independent, and vote for RFK because his policies make sense and he's not divisive in the same way that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are. And I'm really concerned that we are approaching a type of civil war post 2024 if either Joe Biden or Donald Trump gets into office. Because if Joe Biden gets in, you're going to have people on the far right that are just upset. And they're like, look, 1776, we need a revolutionary war. Our elections are broken. We can't do anything. They're going to try to, that will be when an actual insurrection happens. If Trump gets in, you're going to see more Antifa BLM riots in the streets. You're going to see, and it's not going to be state versus state. It's going to be individuals. It's going to be families against family. It's almost like what is predicted in the book of Revelation for end times kind of thing. And whereas I see an RFK Jr., where I don't see the violent uprising on either side if he gets in. And so that to me is another reason why I've been trending more and more towards RFK. Is I'm looking at what are the ramifications of the 2024 election. I see negative whether you see Biden or Trump in. I don't see the same negatives on an RFK victory.
I think that's a good point. And speaking of that, what do you make of Biden, since we're going to shift and talk about Biden for a moment, but what do you make of him refusing over and over again security for RFK Jr. and yet awarding it to Nikki Haley?
What they're doing, in my opinion, is because they are scared of an RFK candidacy. It's the same reason why they did everything they could to stonewall him when he was running as a Democrat in the primaries. They did everything they could to rig the primaries against him, and so then he goes independent. What they're trying to do is they're trying to portray to their base that RFK, he's just a sideshow. He's a circus show. He's got no chance. He's not a legitimate candidate. We're not going to give him the credibility of giving him Secret Service, because if they give him Secret Service now in the primaries before we even really get to the general election, they're giving him credibility that he's a legitimate third party choice for people to actually take seriously. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to position it as he's just a crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. Nobody should pay attention to him. We're not going to give him secrets. He doesn't deserve Secret Service. And I'm going to argue this is also going to be the same justification that the Biden administration is going to give to not participate in the debates. They're going to say, I am not going to participate in a circus sideshow of RFK, who's a tinfoil hat, vaccine denier, whatever kind of person. And we're not going to allow a violent insurrectionist in Donald Trump to take the stage as well. So they're just going to deny it as well, because they know that, in my opinion, I think that RFK would win the debates. I think if it was between Trump and Biden, obviously Trump would win hands down. But with an RFK, the beauty of an RFK, he actually knows all of these things inside and out. He knows all the details. If you just look at his Twitter feed, like he is articulating his positions in his interviews. He's articulating his positions. He's recalling things off the top of his head. He actually knows the intricacies of all these conversations and debates and all of that. And to where I think that an RFK would succeed on the debate stage and actually gain ground. Because when you think about it, he only needs to get a little bit more than a third of the popular vote in any particular state in order to win. If it's a three-way race and it's a dead heat, he doesn't have to get 51%. He basically needs to get 34, 35%, and he could win any particular state in the country. So he only has to pull 5, maybe 10% from each candidate. That's not that difficult if he wipes them off the debate stage. So I think that they're going to do everything they can to avoid having a debate and just basically refuse to allow any kind of credibility towards RFK or Donald Trump for that matter as well.
That makes sense. I mean, everything they've done is so brazen. It seems like giving Nikki Haley security is just another way to give a slap in the face, like like look what we can do and we will do. I mean, it's just so pathetic. I mean, it's unbelievable. But as we move toward wrapping this up, let's talk about will Biden even be the nominee? We have this article talking about Kamala is ready to serve, prepared to serve as president if necessary. And, you know, before she was not talking like this. Maybe she feels threatened that they will do a switcheroo and she'll be let out of that discussion. What do you make of that? Because there's so many different viewpoints on this. You hear a lot about, oh, they're going to switch and bring in Michelle, but then there's people that are just as passionately saying, no, she will absolutely not. If you know her, if you were around her, she has no interest in that. But, you know, if they get desperate enough, who's to say that they won't make that move? What do you think?
I think that I would be surprised if Biden stays in, but I will say this. I think that if they get away with not having a debate, I think they'll just try to push Biden through. I really do, because if they don't have a debate, I think if it was between Trump and Biden, and again, the MAGA crowd's going to hate me for this. If it's between Trump and Biden, I think Biden wins. Like I truly do, and I think a lot of it is because of how divisive the MAGA movement has become. They've turned this everything into almost like a purity test. And if you're not 100% loyal to Donald Trump, you're a deep state operative. You're this, you're that. They're not reaching out to the middle. They're not reaching out to the Democrats in the same way that Donald Trump did in 2016. When Donald Trump ran in 2016, he appealed to the union workers. He appealed to Democrats. He appealed to the independents because he was talking specifically to them. He's not doing this time around. He's talking to his base. That's a concern. I would argue that if it was a face-to-face matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, I think Joe Biden would actually win that matchup, primarily because of, you know, nobody's appealing to the independents. Now you throw in an RFK. RFK could be the spoiler, and this is where I think that if they're going to switch out Joe Biden, it's not as much because of being scared of Donald Trump winning. I think it's because they're scared of RFK, because if RFK can keep either candidate from getting 270 electoral votes, now it goes to Congress. Now the House of Representatives picks the president, the Senate picks the vice president. That's a completely different ballgame, and it doesn't even have to be one of those three candidates. They could pick whoever they want in order to become president if it's a contested election. So I think that if the Democrats run somebody, I think they're grooming Gavin Newsom. I think their number one choice is going to be Michelle Obama. If they can convince her to do it, if they can convince her, we can make sure that you actually win. I think that they would run her because I think they understand that they can't get rid of Kamala Harris, even though they want to. They can't get rid of her because they can't replace a Biden-Harris administration with another white dude in Gavin Newsom. That's just the way the Democrats are. They can't do that. So they'd have to either pair Kamala with Gavin Newsom, or they'd have to bring in like a Michelle Obama to kind of take over. So that way it kind of checks all their intersectionality boxes and all of that. But it's going to be really interesting because I think that RFK may spoil this election for everybody if they don't take his candidacy seriously. And I'll say this too. I've been pushing very hard for Trump to pick RFK as VP. the Trump team has denied that they're having conversations. I know for a fact that they are, because I've been involved in actually connecting the RFK camp with the Trump camp. I know that they're having internal discussions. So everything that's out in the mainstream media is an absolute lie. I know for a fact that there have been conversations between Team RFK and Team Trump about picking RFK as VP. I think that if Trump picks RFK as VP, Trump wins in a landslide. If not, I see a pathway for either a contested election or a Biden victory, or potentially, depending on how the debates go, if there are debates, I could see a legitimate pathway for an RFK presidency. But this thing could be all wrapped up if Trump would just pick RFK as VP.
But RFK Jr. has been asked directly if he would be Trump's VP. And I saw an interview where his wife was standing right next to him and he said, I couldn't, because that would be like the end. Essentially said, I couldn't because that would be the end of my marriage. And she's kind of like, yeah, she's also the one responsible for apparently mandating everyone get a pokey poke before being at their party. And her husband knows the truth of the ridiculousness of that, writes a whole book on that. But yet she still controls, like holds the reins. And it's I don't know. I mean, that to me, I'm, even as a woman, I feel uncomfortable with the amount of control that woman has on him. And I mean, if he's going to be our leader, and we have to know that she's behind the scenes pulling the strings, controlling him, I mean, to the point that she can say, no, you absolutely cannot run as VP with the Trump. I mean, that's just gross to me, quite frankly. So what do you make of that?
Well, so it was interesting when I was talking behind the scenes with people about this, and they're like, Jeff, what do you think about this? I was like, what? And I told him, I was like, I love the idea of Trump and RFK getting together, but if you're gonna do it, you have to convince Cheryl Hines,
Yeah.
and to get over her Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
Then what ended up happening is, after we kind of pieced things together and all that kind of stuff, RFK was basically talking again. This is all behind the scenes, so this is all secondhand information. Everybody, you're not going to find this on the internet, in the news, whatever it is. But RFK was asked directly, if Trump offers you the vice presidency, would you take it? And he said yes. He said, I don't think Trump will offer me, but if Trump offers me VP, I will take it. So I think at a certain point, is it that Cheryl Hines has changed? Maybe to a certain degree, because I know when RFK said that in the interview about I'd probably have to divorce my wife or whatever it is, that was at the time when he was running as a Democrat, or considering switching over to being an independent. But I wonder if, now that they've seen how dirty the Democrats are and how dirty the Joe Biden administration is, that Cheryl Hines would be willing to forego her Trump derangement syndrome in order to make sure that Biden doesn't get into office, because they basically weaponize the government against Biden. She's seen this now firsthand. So she may be able to get over it, where in kind of an ends justifies the means mentality of making sure that Biden doesn't get back in. And also, from what I understand, the RFK would have free reign to deal with the intelligence agencies and deal with Big Pharma and the CDC if he got in as VP, which to me are his two strongest points for bringing anybody into your administration. So again, I would be totally behind it. I'm encouraging Team Trump, both publicly and privately, pick RFK as your VP. I don't like any of the other options that they're floating around there. I pray that they do not pick Tim Scott. I pray that they do not pick any of these guys. If you do, in my opinion, you're going to lose the election.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Vivek has definitely risen in popularity. I think that there's been a misinformation campaign against him, but I mean, who knows at this point? That's the takeaway lately that I'm getting, is that you just don't know who you can trust these days. You can think you know somebody, and then they can stab you in the back. And certainly Trump's no stranger to being stabbed in the back. So hopefully he's got some better discernment and can figure out what's going on with these guys. But I got to wrap this up. So I want you to be able to talk about your network, Freedom First Network, and also let me know what's going on with Pickaxe.
Yeah, definitely. So Freedom First Network, we're actually going through kind of a relaunch. And I'm just put it totally out there for full transparency's sake. I think when we launched Freedom First Network, we got a solid lineup of shows. The problem that I think we faced was that we ended up following Rumble's advice, and we had a kind of an apparent account. We set up all these other individual channels, and it ended up being that where all the individual shows were trying to build up their own individual shows. So we got some shows that are doing phenomenal on Rumble with huge followings, and other shows that are kind of struggling, and things like that. So what we're doing is we're doing a revamp to where we're just going to launch a Freedom First Network Rumble channel, just one feed. All the shows will be on one feed. So if you subscribe to Freedom First Network, you'll have access to the entire lineup of shows. And I'm being very specific about the shows that we're bringing on. We're going to have about 15 shows at a relaunch. We're relaunching basically in March. Top level hosts. They're all going to be exclusive shows to Freedom First Network. So we'll have everybody from I'm going to do a show with Mel K. I do a show with Karen Kingston. Going to do a weekly show with Matt Couch. We're bringing on Jasmine St. Clair is going to have a show. Haley Kennington, Ann Vandersteel is going to do a weekly show for us. So we're going to have a really good, solid lineup of people that are all like-minded. We all want to save this country. Even when there are disagreements, we're willing to engage with each other and debate and go in each other's shows and talk about our disagreements and all that kind of stuff. So you guys can do that. You guys can subscribe to that over on the Freedom First Network Rumble channel. We'll be doing the really big relaunch coming up in March, so make sure you guys are staying tuned for that. We'll just have a really good lineup of shows. Then with Pickaxe, we're for people that don't know, that's the new social media platform that I'm building. We're launching this tentatively middle of March. I should have a firm date here in the next week or two. And it's really interesting because I've been building this thing out for about a year. We're fully funded. We're doing this thing the right way. I'm building it to where it's going to be a completely constitutionally protected free speech platform. We're not beholden to big tech at all. And on top of that, we're doing monetization opportunities for content creators, unlike anything that's out there. And so we're setting this up to where it's going to be censorship free. I don't have to play by anybody else's rules. And on top of that, we're going to make it to where people will be enticed to actually come over to our platform from big tech, not just taking all the rejects, like all the other alternative social medias. They were just the home for all the people that were getting kicked off. I wanted to create something where we'd actually entice people to come over here. So we're going to be doing that with our monetization opportunities and some of the different features we're going to be adding and stuff. And so we're in the final weeks of building it out. We're hopefully going to be launching here maybe the second, maybe third week of March. I'll have a firm date here very, very soon. But it's going to be a really, really cool, slick platform. And everybody is always like, how are you going to beat all the alternatives? And I'm like, I don't really care. I'm trying to figure out how do we take on big tech, because that's what we have to do. We got to build something to where not only you're not beholden to big tech, but you're actually going to be competitive with them. And so I said to my tech team, anything that we are introducing, I need to at the very least one up all the features that another platform has. And so it's like, we're going to incorporate articles. People are going to have the ability to write articles on the platform, but we're doing it in a unique way. I'll announce some of those features coming up soon to where nobody else is doing what we're doing. So that way people are actually looking at Pickaxe as, oh, well, I could actually make this my home base, and I can monetize, and I can not get censored, and I can build my following much, much easier and do all that. Yeah, I'm going to come over to Pickaxe, and I'm getting people not just on the right, not just the MAGA movement. We're targeting center to center right people, but I'm getting people that are lefties. I'm getting Instagram influencers that are like, look, if you're doing what you're telling me, I'm coming over there. I may even just leave Instagram altogether because I need to monetize my content. These lefties can't even monetize their content on Instagram anymore because of the new algorithms and all that. So it's going to be a really cool platform. People can sign up for that at pickaxe.com. And then that way you guys can be the first people on the platform when we launch the beta testing. So.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a need. It's overwhelming for any content creator to try and have a presence on so many different platforms. Anything that could make it more simple would be welcome. I mean, even today, I was going to be doing this live on Rumble as well, and I have a little message on the top saying something's not right. So, woo! This is getting back into it, So I'll have to figure out how to address that later. But yeah, this stuff isn't easy, especially if you don't come from tech. My talent and my background is just being able to write and interview and get up on a set and talking to a camera. It's hard that so many of us have been stretched to things that are quite frankly outside of our ability. So I really got to stretch my muscles on the tech angle and figure out how to make this more simple for myself and quite frankly, just work. So the biggest advice I can give to you about Pickaxe is I just hope you make it very user-friendly. Hope it'll be user-friendly for some of us that struggle with these things.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's very simple. Very click and go here, and whatever it is not going to be all the typical setting up and all that. I think one of the other things that I do want to highlight as well is that because there are a lot of other social media platforms that are out there, but any platform that is also in the Apple App Store or the Google App Store, they're censoring you. So I don't care if you're talking True Social, Getter, all these other platforms. They are censoring you because they have to, by the rules of Apple and Google, they have to do that. True Social, they're using artificial intelligence. They contract with a Silicon Valley AI company to do their content moderation. I was talking with Foster Colson the other day, who's the founder of the wellness company. He was saying, look, all my doctors, they're getting censored on True Social. They're getting censored on all these other places
Yeah.
because they have to play by the rules. So he's like, if you guys can make Pickaxe completely censorship free, especially for the medical freedom crowd, he's like, they're all going to come over to the platform because now all of a sudden they're not having to deal with algorithms on the supposedly free speech social media platforms.
Yeah.
And so I'm working with attorneys. We're working through all their terms and conditions and privacy policies and all that. And to where we're like, yes, we got to protect ourselves, but also I'm actually putting in the terms and conditions, the actual First Amendment. And I half jokingly told my tech team, if somebody's going to report a post, like I kind of want them to have to check a box. I've read the First Amendment to know to be able to say, is this a violation of the First Amendment or not?
That's a good
Because
point.
if it's free speech, it's free speech. You're allowed to say it. If you're doxing somebody, if you're threatening somebody, that's not protected by the First Amendment. But if
Yeah.
you're giving a bad information or even quote unquote disinformation or your own opinion that maybe it's wrong, like I'm not going to censor that. I'm not going to downplay you for your views. And so it's just a different perspective, I think, on things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeff, you've been so generous with your time. And quite frankly, I have another interview coming up and I need to make sure I can feed my baby in between.
Yeah.
So that's another good thing about being completely independent is I have the flexibility to be a mom and do this at the same time and take some breaks in between. But I do really appreciate your time. I know you have the struggle too, potty training. I have baby teething, it is what it is, but we're still trying to press on and be a voice for the voiceless and a champion of free speech. So I thank you for that and everything you're doing, Jeff.
No, hey, Christy, I really appreciate it. It's always a blast talking to you. And we definitely need to get you back on my show again.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, folks. First one in the can of trying to get back into taking this by the horns and just going fully independent. God willing, I'll get some help as far as production goes, someone that can at least click some buttons, bring some things up for me. But that's what it comes down to. Full ownership, control, freedom of speech, and mean it. And so I'm just going to continue in this wild west of independent journalism and see where God leads me next. That's what it all comes down to. I want to serve whatever purpose he wants me to, whatever message he wants me to. I'm praying that he guides me to the people he wants me to amplify their voice, and that he will keep the demons of censorship and technical problems and all of that far, far from me. So you can pray that with me. And if you want to support my work, just share, like, comment. That really helps beat the algorithms, because I need to build this back up. 100,000 on Facebook, but only like a handful of people tune in, really. So we got to beat these algorithms and figure out what's going on with that. But check out my website. You're going to be seeing it's looking different very soon. It's getting a lot of work done, making it prettier and more accessible, and all kinds of new things in store. So keep in touch with me. You can go to klim.news, klim.news, and just sign up to be a subscriber free, just to get updates from me so I can continue to talk to you. But I really appreciate you tuning in for this conversation. It's going to be a wild year, definitely going to be a wild year. And my commitment is to keeping my mind open and not rushing to join a side, for goodness sakes. My side is marching with God's army. Remember that song that you learned in Sunday school? I just want to be where God wants me to be, support who God wants me to support. And I think that I need to keep an open mind and listen to his direction when it comes to that. So that's what I'm going to do. Well, thank you for tuning in. And I'll actually be hopping back on here real shortly. So maybe I'll see you then too. All right. Thank you.